We had a homebrew Pokemon RPG we ran that was so much fun.
Okay.
And
gotta talk about that. Okay.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Geek Peek. Today I'm talking with Zachary Tyndall. He is a creator on Patreon who creates D&D maps for his patrons. This was an inspirational one. Zachary is a creator. He's also a GM. He has some amazing ideas about family and about being a creator. And if you are a creator, I think you'll take a lot of value from this one. I certainly enjoyed talking to Zachary very, very much. So without further ado, enjoy the interview.
Zachary Tyndall, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
I am so excited to talk to you. I have so many questions about your creative process. You are one of my inspirations in terms of creating content and doing things that you love. Before I say anything, I do want you to introduce yourself for those in my audience that don't know who you are. So Zachary, please tell us what you are creating and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Zachary. Zachary Tyndall. I make maps for RPG, for virtual tabletops, but also they're high enough quality and stuff. You can even make them for normal tabletops. I do all kinds of stuff within the D&D and RPG communities. I have done art my entire life. Everything from normal drawing, painting, filmmaking, and now somehow map making. I'm not sure exactly how I got here, but it was a journey. I do want to say thank you for you as well, because you actually were my first patron of anybody who I didn't know. And it was also day one of me launching my Patreon. And the amount of happy dances that happened from that, since day one. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so you are creating maps, and this is such an amazing undertaking. Like, I imagine making a map is a lot of work. But before I take you into talking about how you even got into this, I do want to take you to your past. Before you started creating content or maps or whatever you want to call it, art, who was Zachary before all of that began?
Yeah, child Zachary got in trouble all the time for drawing. If I was listening to a teacher, I was drawing. If I was taking a test, I was also drawing on the test. If I was turning in a report, I had doodles of whatever I was writing on for my report on there. It's just always been a thing. I've later learned, this is the kind of thing, as an adult I learned, that it's actually a coping mechanism for me to be able to listen and process, is for me to draw. And so all throughout, even into work and meetings and stuff like that, I would always be drawing and always be doodling. Because if I could put a pen to paper, I could listen. But if I have to watch somebody, I will zone out and just daydream. So from very, very early age, I've been drawing and doodling. It's come and gone throughout the years, and it's taking different forms. I did a lot of just doodling and drawing, like mandala style stuff, since I was a child, not even knowing what mandalas were, kind of making them. And that led to filmmaking and video making, photography, me very young having my own business that it worked. It paid the bills. It got me to literally other countries in different parts of the world and allowed me to travel. But I learned a lot of valuable lessons about having your own business and follow through and all that kind of stuff along the way. So I've just kind of always dabbled in and around art of different kinds. And even if I've left it for a bit, I've always come back.
Okay, you mentioned something about photography. And that is something that I don't know about you. So, are you like a professional photographer?
I guess technically for a time you could have called me a professional photographer. I made a living off of it, so yes. I turned my last semester of university in America into a year in Ireland, and doing film school. And prior to that, I had, bought a DSLR and started getting into like some amateur filmmaking and, vlogging and stuff like that. And along came the photography part. And then when I got to Ireland, I needed to make money. So I started doing headshots and all those kind of things. Never ventured into like the whole like wedding type thing, but I did travel photography. I did some stuff for different travel blogs and some travel companies, and just kind of did that hustle to kind of try to make it work, So I did all kinds of like, commercials and music videos for the video side of things while also doing photography, and I just use the same camera. Actually, I have it right here, my old camera. Boom, there you go. I just took
Which
it out.
one is it?
It's a Canon, it's a Rebel T3i, which is the American version of, I think, the 600D, I think. So it's a good few years old at this point. But look, it did the job, right? I was able to do professional work with it. And I was able to kind of make up some of the lack of features there with just general knowledge of skills and knowledge of, framing and filming and audio and all that kind of stuff to add to it. So
you dabbled in photography, and you also drawn all of your life. Where do you meet Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I was a teenager when I first started Dungeons and Dragons. I think I was 12 or 13. Happened in the high school or the middle school cafeteria, with some friends, and then in high school a little bit, and then I moved off to college, and it kind of dabbled here and there. But it wasn't just Dungeons and Dragons at that point. I did a few other systems within the RPG community, and I've kind of come in and out of it for a good while. You'd have periods of time where you did a lot of it and then nothing, and then periods of time where you did a lot of it and then nothing. And then while in New Zealand, my now wife and I had some friends who also moved to New Zealand just after us. We had a homebrew Pokemon RPG that we ran that was so much fun.
Okay.
And
gotta talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, and then did that kind of spark that interest again, and then it kind of dabbled a little bit here and there, and then actually it was just before the pandemic that my wife actually brought it up again. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did that again? I was like, yeah, and then it just full on since, and I have a game that I've been running for over 3 years now. Same campaign, and with a group of my friends. And then I have another game that I run every other week, and I have a game that I've played in for a good 2.5 years now. So,
running? Do you mean DMing? You are.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. Okay. So, before I talk about DMing, tell me a bit about the mashup of D&D and Pokemon.
Yeah.
How does that work?
There was a lot of lessons learned in having to run NPCs, because Pokemon trainers all have a bunch of Pokemon. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of quirkiness. I grew up on Pokemon, right? I remember I camped out of the mall before the first Pokemon game came out. We were there at 1 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the game to come out. And so it's kind of always been a part of my life. And so I really dived deep. I made my own region, had my own bad guys. I made my own gyms. I did all that kind of stuff and just let my players have as much fun as they could, and so it was a lot of fun going into the deep lore, the deep lore of Pokemon, of like the shows and stuff that you wouldn't normally get even in the game and things like that, and really bringing out kind of like some of the mystical sides of it. And I think that was the first time. It's my first time as a DM, and it really allowed me to kind of just be as creative as possible. The whole thing is, a Pokemon universe. It's all fantasy,
Yes. So I'm curious about how like battles work in
Yeah.
such a thing. Like how do you incorporate like the classic traditional Pokemon battle into a D&D session?
Yeah, so it was all theater of the mind at that point. And so I used, which I now learned is used in a few different systems of like short, medium, and long range. So, you do actions that are closer and stuff. And the battles at first took a long time because I hadn't really DM'd, and you have, three players, all with Pokemon plus, opposing Pokemon. And I'm running all those. And so it was a lot, but we ended up streamlining it, right? We ended up finding our own way, finding our own home brews. We talked communications key, right? What's working, what's not. And so there's a lot of kind of like changing some things and making things work, but it was a lot of fun because we used like the kind of almost like, the D&D in general, RPGs, they have that kind of turn-based feel with turn orders and stuff like that. So it kind of kept the Pokemon feel of, it's your turn, you use your move, that kind of thing. And I just made sure I brought in the real world elements of, 3 dimensions, right? Elevations and giant Pokemon and, just kind of like weird things that were happening and the mystical side of stuff. And we found our way through communication, which I think is important for any D&D group. But I think I learned that was a key feature for us, right? Because we were all kind of finding our way through the Pokemon system that wasn't really, it was still like in like alpha, beta testing at that point. So it was kind of us filling in the gaps as we went.
Wow. That is so cool. Like in my mind, when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking like, well, Pokemon does have turns, and you could actually use sort of like minis and put them like on a battlefield, which could be a battlefield in like a D&D session. So there is like a lot of overlay, but I'm like, wow. You could do a lot of things there, and like there are 2-on-2 battles, like.
I found in the beginning, like having just one-on-one battles, which is what you typically do when you play Pokemon, wasn't quite as fun because you would have the other players just sitting around. So I incorporated a lot of just big battles. The idea just, generally everybody would do it. And also in the Pokemon anime, you have the Pokemon also like, stopping, trucks or stopping like non-Pokemon stuff from happening. So I remember there was one time when there was a helicopter and they had to stop the helicopter from taking off. And so the helicopter had its own turn order, and was trying to do stuff. And so it was a fun kind of situation of, like I was able to just add in stuff that wasn't your normal things to the turn order, if you will, to kind of bring that element out of it. Which I think it was just fun. It was a thing that we just did once a week. We all lived together. We lived in New Zealand, and we overlooked the Bay of Wellington. It was absolutely gorgeous view from sitting at the table playing D&D or Pokemon. So it was great,
You talked about like how you incorporated Pokemon and D&D, and I want to ask you about DMing. You mentioned that you DM'd this campaign, and how did you start? Like, did you come into DMing, or was that something like that you felt you needed to do for the group? And also, like, who are some of your inspirations from the beginning as you started DMing?
Yeah. So I think at that point, it had been a good few years since I had played any RPGs. And so, but I had the most experience out of everybody. And so it just kind of, and I didn't mind it, right? I was happy to do it. So I kind of volunteered myself. And yeah, I just kind of ran with it. I was happy. We all talked about it, because I think one of the group saw that there was a Pokemon RPG that was being made. And I thought it was really cool. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, hands up. And yeah, I spent the time, and just sat down and, I thankfully realized things, for example, like world building, right? I don't have to build up the whole world right now. I just have to build up where they are. And, and I was able to kind of, take that mentality from the beginning and just kind of jump in, and we did one-on-one sessions as well because we lived together. So kind of be like, okay, cool. You want to go off and do your own thing? Cool. Let's do a one-on-one session. And we'd like hide in one of the other rooms while my wife and our flatmate was like, what are they doing? What they're playing? Oh, let's listen in. What's happening? And we were like, you can't come in. We just had fun with it, we didn't take it too seriously. And I think that was the main thing, is that we used it for fun. And I was happy to take that kind of quote unquote leadership role, I guess, of a DM. I didn't really view it as too much responsibility. I viewed it as just somebody in the group had to do it. I was happy to do it, so why not me? I enjoy being that person. I think I get as much, if not more, enjoyment from being a DM than I do as a player. And yeah, I was happy to do it.
Would you say that there are skills that you learned from DMing this campaign?
Yeah, loads. One thing that I learned was the importance of communication. I think it was one of the most important things, because in particular the rules weren't done yet fully, and everything was kind of like, fill in the gaps as you go. Don't throw things at your players if you haven't talked about it beforehand. I had a really cool idea for for filling in the gaps for like a catching mechanic. And I threw it in the middle of a session. It didn't end well. Naturally, because he rolled a natural 20, and you roll a natural 20, you're like, oh, yeah, it's a success. And I was like, oh, but I had this new system. And they're like, what? And then, yeah, so communication would have really helped in that situation. And so, yeah, I think that was one of the main things I learned. And I think it was helped with the fact that it was a lot of filling in the gaps of a system that was being made at the time. I was in the forums of the system, putting in what I was doing, and it was helping shape even the final rules of the book, of the system. And I think the communication was the key thing. And I'm always about communication inside the game, outside the game. And I think that as a DM, it's my job to be as clear as I can be, and to allow the players the ability to feel that they have their own input into the game, and feel that they have the ability to make the story theirs. And I think communication does that,
Okay, that's cool. Now, after we talked about DMing, we talked about world building and all that. Talk me through how this little part of your life leads you into map making.
Yeah, it was just before my daughter was born. She's 4 now. That I realized it was when we were expecting her, that I needed art back in my life, because I'd gone a period of time without it. And I realized as well that, if I'm going to have a kid and I want them to be able to follow their dreams, I want them to be able to do the things that they enjoy, to be able to, have passions that they actually do, not wish they had done, that I needed to do it.
My heart.
I realized that I had to be the example, right? If I want my kids to live that kind of life of happiness and enjoyment of those things, I needed to be able to enjoy it and live it myself. And so I hadn't drawn in years, and I just started drawing for Inktober. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's like a yearly thing for October. Inktober, yeah. It's okay. A thing where it's like you draw every day for the month of October. I just started. It was like 3 days before. I just cool, I'm doing it. I'm just going to draw every day. And then that continued. And I just kept going, kept drawing. Then I was like, cool, I want to get back into coloring, so whether it's pencils or markers or like watercolor, I want to kind of get back into that, or acrylics. So I just started doing it. And it was just one step at a time, and I just kept getting back into different ways. And then when when I started DMing for the group that I DM'd now, that's been going for over 3 years now, I needed some maps, right? And I wasn't gonna be able to find exactly what I wanted anywhere because it was a weird location. So I made it myself. It was crude. It was simple. But it was good, and it was functional. And then and then that continued, and then I was still doing the art, but like I found this is the first time I also ever did anything digitally. I never did anything digital before that. It was always traditional materials, practical, and so it was like a new skill for me, right? It's like, oh, this is cool, this is new, and I get to learn something new and do something new. But there was that moment of like, oh, it doesn't, like, if I draw something on paper, I know my hand will do it, but on the computer it doesn't. And it's easy to see that as like demoralizing or negative, but I see it as a challenge. I'm like, yes, I can learn this. I can do it. I can make what's up here on paper, but if I just put practice into it, I can also put it onto the computer. And so I started doing that more. And then I took a chance, right? Just a real off chance. There was a few YouTubers who put out a call for map makers. And I had only made a few maps. I think I made like 4, 5, 6 maps in total. And I messaged them. I'm like, hey, look, here's the maps I've made. Are you interested? And they said, sure, we'll give you a go. That was it, If I didn't ask, I didn't get, right? So... And again, they asked me to use a different program than I was using, so I was like, cool. So I bought that program, and I had no idea how to use the program because it was fairly different, but similar enough, right? And again, I just learned it, right? You just did it. I just sat down at the computer and I did it, and I powered through it. And you get those feelings of like, I can't do this, or this isn't what I want it to be, but you just know that with time it will be. And this one doesn't have to be perfect because this next one will be better. And so I kind of, it was just that going from the traditional art, getting back into that. And then I think that gave me the confidence to be able to do it digitally. And then that just kind of throw it out there and see what sticks. The mentality of, hey, look, you need maps. I can make maps. Here's what I've made. I'm not going to oversell myself. Here's what I can do. So yeah, and then I've just not stopped.
There is something like, I love that we describe this in like this sort of like, I did this and I didn't stop and I made it. But I want to ask you, what was your low points? This is not easy. Learning a skill, doing these things. Where did you find yourself? Like, was the lowest point, and how did you overcome it?
The lowest point in kind of like making maps, you think?
In like the journey of like learning a new skill, like doing this thing from scratch.
Yeah, I think anything that you do is affected by everything else in your life, right? And I think, there will always be forces in your life that will try to keep you from succeeding and try to keep you down. And I think the important thing is to try to overcome those things. And I think for me, I'm happy to talk about mental health and everything. It was midway through the pandemic, not even midway, like maybe a year through the pandemic, full just mental health kind of breakdown, right? I had to quit my job, and the wife and I swapped, and so so it's right, I couldn't do it anymore. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I was at a point where I was having to deal with a lot of mental stuff from way back from childhood and all the way up to now, while also trying to be productive, while also having a 1-year-old, also trying to work, also with the stress of everything that was going on in the world. And that was a point of, in this particular process, where I was like, I just wanted to walk away, right? And I hadn't quite gotten to the level of skill with, making the maps that I knew I could. And it was frustrating. And on top of everything else, I just wanted to quit, right? But I also just kind of wanted to quit everything. And I recognized that. I was able to recognize that, like, it isn't just this one thing, because everything in life contributes. And so I forget the name. Is it it's behavior activation or something along those lines, where you just make yourself sit down and do something, and then you let the motivation find you, instead of you trying to find the motivation. And that's what I ended up doing. And this is something that I did with drawing and painting and stuff as well. When, like, look, I don't have to sit down for hours. Just sit down for 10 minutes. Put a timer on your phone. Sit down for 10 minutes. And when that timer goes off, you can leave. 10 minutes every day. That's all you need. And then what ends up happening is you end up staying there for 2-3 hours. Because then you're there and you're in it. And you don't want to go away because now you're doing something. And so I had that time where, I had to choose to leave a job. Because of mental health, I had to completely reevaluate everything that was structurally done with my family, and so, I had to, then, I went from not seeing my daughter because of work, to being in charge of my daughter, and also still processing everything and doing everything all at once. And I was able to somehow, and I think it's just, again, it's that just sit down for 10 minutes, you can leave after 10 minutes, that knowing that you have that permission to stop, helped and allowed me to sit down and then continue. And even if it wasn't map making, if it was just drawing, if I just sit down and just do something, just create something small, something little, put one word on a page, it doesn't matter. Just sit down and do something. And that kept me going. And it sounds silly when you think about it, but that little, 10 minutes in a night of doing it, and then that leading to something more, and then allowing me to accomplish and make something, whether it was a drawing or a painting or a map or even doing some writing, that in that really dark time still gave me those little snippets of accomplishments, of success, of being able to do things, which then allowed me to move forward faster. I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, but
it does. It does. And I love that you took this time in your life, and you risen from it in such an inspiring way. It's like going up the staircase, one step at a time. Yeah. And I love this. And also, to rise up from there even further, when I first interacted with you, I discovered that you have a Patreon. And we also have fan questions from your Patreon. But talk to me a little about how your journey leads you into Patreon. What was behind the decision to open a Patreon and start a private community?
Yeah, this is one of the first things that I've done that I've enjoyed, that I also believe in myself. And so I knew there was more there. I knew there was more that I could do. And I knew the quality. I was getting to a point where I was starting to be very proud of the maps I was making. And I knew I was getting to the point where I was looking at, I wasn't looking at my maps anymore thinking, oh, this could be better. I was looking at my maps going, this is good. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, again, put it into the world and try to manifest it yourself, right? If you don't start doing something, you don't get anything. And so I was like, right, okay. So I set a 6-month window. I'm like, cool. In 6 months' time, it starts. And this was during the time when things were the worst for me, And so this was like, so I was able to, at the time when my mental health and everything was quite bad, say, okay, 6 months from now, I'm doing this. And I set a goal, and it was a very realistic goal. In 6 months, I want 2 months worth of maps done. It's not that hard, if I can do 3, I'm happy with that. And so it allowed me to kind of prepare that and get that done. But it also gave me some purpose, and because I knew where I was and I knew where I could go, and I was getting to that point, and I knew that what I could do could have value for people, and I knew that that it could get me to that point that where I want to be with it. And it also is something that I can do on the side for now, and I can because my main priority right now are my 2 kids. I'm with my 2 kids during the day, and in the evenings and on weekends I work. So my day starts quite early in the morning and it stops at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I have very long days, but it'll get there. Because right now my family is my priority, and I'm lucky that I have a very supportive wife and family, and I'm able to do it. And so I went into that. I went into the idea of making it a Patreon, making it something that I can build a community with the idea that this is a 2 to 3 year build up. This isn't a 6-month turnaround time. This is something that will be 2-3 years in the making, and then when the kids are older and they're in school, then I can devote even more time to. And I think that helped me with the mentality of like, let's get this done, right? Let's do this, because it gave me a goal. It gave me something to do. It gave me something to look forward to. And it's slow, and that's fine, because I have that mentality. I have the mentality of, this isn't going to be I get rich in 2 months because I've kind of thing. So this is a kind of thing that like I can build, and I can grow, and I can help other people along the way. And as I get there, hopefully there's a community that enjoys what I do, and we can do it together. And and I hope to add more and more to what I can provide, because I know that I can give more. But for now, it's it's a way for me to do something that I'm proud of, which is something nice to say, and something that can help other people, which is again something nice to say, and I've enjoyed it so far.
Okay, so with that high note, let's move to some fan questions.
Go for it.
Okay, so the first question we have here is from Ralph, and Ralph asks, how do you tackle verticality with your maps, and does it factor into when you sit down and design a new map?
Definitely, yeah. I as a DM and as a player, I'm always thinking 3 dimensions, right? As a player, I'm like, how tall are these things? Is there a second floor? Is there and DMs who have me as a player have to think about that stuff and realize that I am happy to climb up to the second floor and jump off and do things, and I want to use the environment, and that goes into my DM styles as well. Like I have no problem giving enemies and stuff the high ground and making things more difficult because of terrain and different kind of environments. And so when I make a map, I think of it that way. I think of it, if I'm a player, if I'm a DM, what can I do to help both? Right? Can I do something on this map that will allow a DM to do something unique, do something cool, surprise their players, hide some enemies, and as a player, will they be able to use my map in a way that can do fun stuff, in a way that they can get an advantage, or they can get the surprise, or they can do something. And so when I make the maps for the verticality of things, and even just the environments and the different kind of, ground, water, all those kind of things, I try to put those in with both of them in mind.
Do you envision like the potential stories that could happen on a map that you design?
I do, yeah. And when I'm making a map, I start thinking about what could happen on the map. I start thinking where people could go, what people could use, and the fun things that could happen on the map, for sure. And I think I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And I think even, for example, a map that I made for next month, it's a port, right? And there's a ship and there's stuff like that. But I put interiors to the buildings because I'm like, cool. Like, yeah, this could be used for a shopping thing, but it could be used for a lot more. I put forks and knives on the plates for a reason because, sure, as a player, if you want to, impromptu weapon, right? I put little I put little gems around the place, little details, little fun things, right? Like there's a cat sleeping on a canopy or something. And so, sure, a player could try to speak with animals and try to talk to the cat or learn something. Or DM could use that cat for nefarious reasons. And so, yeah, I try to like put things into the map, and I'm always kind of thinking about that kind of stuff as I do it. And I think that brings a lot of enjoyment for me, for sure, to be able to like think about that as I make the maps.
Let's go to the next question, and that question is from Connor. Connor asks, what creator would you most like to make maps for?
Oh, I mean, like, obviously you have like the Matt Covilles of the world and and that kind of stuff. I would love to be able to see my maps printed out, used for different, tabletops, like streams and stuff like that, which, I do plan on in the process of getting information of ways to print my maps and stuff like that. I think I'm old school that I prefer like a flat map to like built terrain. I think built terrain looks cool, but I like, grid and paper, kind of style and maps that are flat like that. So there's definitely a few there that I like. But I mean, as far as like a company or a person, I mean, look, like Matt Coville, stuff like that. I loved it. Right? That'd be insane. I feel like I made it. And I've made maps for Mr. Rex on YouTube. So I've made maps for his Kickstarter, and he has some stuff there for sale for me. Dungeon Coach, DM Layer, stuff like that. So on their Patreons, I've made stuff for them. And I was and like it's really nice to have worked with them and kind of have that. But I think for me, it's going to sound super cheesy, and I don't mean it to be like a plug. I think I get more enjoyment for making maps out of, patrons and stuff. I've been talking to a few patrons about things that they would like in maps. And so, the next round of maps I'm working on right now are 2 maps that are going to be that the patrons said that they would find useful for their own campaigns. And the idea that, they would use it, I'm like, oh, so cool.
Okay, and Connor has another question, and that question is, what would you consider the most difficult part of map making?
Time. Honestly,
Time.
There's always the adage of what is it? It needs to be done, not perfect. Right, so because I can always keep doing more and more and more, but at some point, you have the sunken cost of time put in there, but also when I make maps, I make them extremely detailed, and because I make them how I like them. Could I make them less detailed? Sure. Are the people who are far more successful for me that have far less detail? Sure, but I've always, for my art and what I do, I'm always very detailed oriented. It's just kind of, it's my nature. And so a single map could take 60 to 90 hours, And again, I do evenings and weekends, so time is kind of the main thing for me. But the rest of it I enjoy because I get to watch things and listen to audiobooks and watch streams and podcasts and stuff as I work, which is lovely.
Okay. That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay, the next question comes from Craig, and Craig asks, "What is your dream map, and what excites you when making it?"
My dream map. That's really interesting. I've spent 3.5 years in a nautical campaign with my players, and there's a lot of things on there that I love to do, and I think for me, there's a lot of kind of fantastical locations that I want to visit, right? I want to do more like dragon hordes and, kind of like hellish kind of lavas and, all those kind of like very like over the top fantastical places. But if I had like a dream map, that's really interesting. Probably something with the astral sea and space because I love space. And, that's just the perfect marriage of like, pirates in space. So I say definitely doing more space type maps, which I haven't done because it's very niche, and so I haven't really ventured too much into that. So when I do, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be weird and quirky, and I'm really looking forward to it.
You need to tell me when that happens.
Yes.
Okay. The next question is from Ramona O'Regan. I hope I didn't butcher your name, Ramona. Do you start with the general landscape or all of the key features first?
Yeah, I think this is a holdover from drawing and painting. I do very big blocked out spaces. So my maps start with just random rectangles and squares and circles. And so I can visually, because if I can visually see the spaces, then I can start to understand what goes in it. Same kind of thing if I'm drawing a body, right? The first thing I'm going to do, just circles and heads and, get the general like outline, and so the first thing I start with is the overview shapes. And then from there, I'll have like a theme, right? So it might be like, a church or whatever. And I just start playing with shapes. And then eventually something clicks and I'm like, I like that. And now the final product might be different, but that gets me going. That gets me going to that direction.
The next question is from Matilda. And Matilda asks, when it comes to traps and secret doors, is it worth putting them into a map and worry about metagaming? Or does it matter if you trust your players?
That's a very good question. Something that I've often wondered myself. I try to do a little bit of both. I try to add parts of the map that only the DM will see, but make it in such a way that it's not obvious to the players. So I might have a corridor, and on one side of the corridor you might have spikes or something going down, but it's outside of the wall, so that when you're on a VTT or even in person, that part's not shown, right? So you can only see the part that they're in, and it's just a room or just a corridor, just a hallway for the players, but the DM can see the rest. So I try to kind of find a balance there. And I also just trust that a DM can just add whatever they want to the map, right? So at any point of the map, something could be there that's not there. So I try to add it so that way for those who might not be as comfortable tweaking and changing and adding, it's there. But then also for those who are comfortable doing that, they can just add and do whatever they want because there's enough space and areas on the map.
That's very cool. You're like giving the DM a playground of stuff, of potential stuff that they can do.
Yeah. And also a tip for anyone watching, for as a DM or as a player, what you see on a map is not everything that's there. So don't feel that if you don't see something, you can't do it, or if or you can't pretend like it's not there, right? So if you walk into a room and you say, right, okay, here's an inn, but is there a very specific, thing that's on counter on the table, even though it's not on the map. Sure, yeah, it's there on the counter, So even if you're using like any maps, you can kind of go in with the last questions. You can still make it your own as a DM and as a player. So.
Next question is from Rufus, and Rufus asks, when it comes to specific monster encounter maps, how tactical should you make the map? Should bandit camps be surrounded by traps, or forts be super defensive with lots of archer points?
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes in the type of campaign that you're running as a DM, and for players, right? The kind of every group is going to be different. Every group is going to play differently, and so when you look at a map, for traps and stuff, you can always add them, right, if they're not there. And I think as a DM, you have that option to make it more or less dangerous at any point. And I think your players, the campaign you're running, the kind of style that you run, and so I think you can always add it. And as far as like forts and stuff like that, there's obviously the stereotypical bandits in a forest. There's 2 tents and a fire and stuff. But I like the idea that in the real world there'd be a little bit more of an encampment, right? You'd have more defenses. The NPCs in the world, they want to live and they want to do things that are smart. So me personally, I run things that way. I run things more a little bit more realistically. Everyone wants to live. Everyone wants to survive. Everyone has generally seen most of the tactics that a player can throw at you, because this is a world that has dragons and trolls and bandits and heroic adventurers. And so, if you're in a cave or a fort, they're going to have, plans for people trying to sneak around. You might have one druid in your party who can turn into a spider, but realistically, they would know of people who can turn into spiders. So there'd be defenses. And so I try to play things as realistic as possible that way. And to kind of, keep things honest, I guess.
Okay, the next question is from Nerfman. Cool name, Nerfman. I love that. How much forethought do you put for certain characters and abilities when designing your maps? For example, flying for climbing speeds or spells.
Yeah, I think I don't do very specific character, a fighter or barbarian, or those kind of style kind of thoughts. But I do try to take into consideration play styles, I guess. And, and different characters, different classes and stuff would have different play styles. Because I think there's too many things when you play D&D that could happen. You can't really plan for everything. And so I try to make the maps in such a way that allows for the freedom for people to have shenanigans. Because I don't want to take away shenanigans, because shenanigans are fun. But I also don't want... I try to make things not as easy to just completely cheese, I guess, right? So when I plan out hallways or I plan out kind of the layouts of stuff, I do try to make it a little bit easier, I guess, to play in and to DM in. So I try to make areas of the maps that can be interacted with in different ways. So some areas of the maps might be able to be interacted with and somebody who's more dexterous, somebody who is more strong, somebody who might be able to magically fly to get an advantage. And so while I don't take them into account very specifically, like this ability, that ability, I try to use a varied style and varied kind of environments that can allow for the different classes and different abilities and different magics to be able to be useful and impactful.
Next question comes to us from Terry. And Terry asks, any plans for a mega dungeon map? What would that process look like from a start to finish points?
Yeah, I have very grandiose ideas for not only a mega dungeon but also a mega city. And it's the kind of thing that wouldn't be able to be done all at one time, right? And I have, and again, this is based on the campaign that I've been running for years. I know exactly the location that it would be perfect for, right? And I want to build that. I want to build what would be like kind of in my world that could be ported to anybody else's game. It would be multi-layers. Like if I were to make a mega dungeon, you're talking 15, 18 levels, easy. Each level probably having multiple maps, 2-3 maps each level. And so what it would probably end up being would be a multi-year project of me, making dungeons that happen to fit together, but also work separately. So that, throughout the months, you might be getting one dungeon here, one dungeon there, one dungeon here, one dungeon there. And then towards the end, all of a sudden, they all start clicking into place. And like I even started doing that with my next month's maps. The port that I made, same style, same type of assets for an older port that I made. So you can actually use them together, and they can be a continuation, or use them separately, and it's perfectly fine. And it happens to be one of the ports of an area in my world that I have in my mind. So I'm kind of building up my own world. Long-term plan, have ideas of turning, my homebrew world into some kind of sellable thing, possibly, maybe. But like, that's who knows how many years down the line. It's not a thing that I'm looking to do right now, but this is my way of kind of getting into that. Eventually, if that does happen, or when we'll manifest it now, Oren, you and I. When that happens, I will have maps of full maps of areas done, that can be put together. So I think mega cities, mega dungeons, totally something I want to do. But if I do it, I want to do it right, and I want to make sure that they're big, and that they're really impressive, and at the quality that I want them to be, which again takes time.
That's so cool. I love it. Okay, the next question comes to us from Darren Scannell. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How do you deal with a creative block?
We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think creative blocks comes to everybody. And it doesn't even have to be creative. You can just have blocks for absolutely anything in your life. And I think, those blocks come because all of our life is connected, past, present, and future. And I think it all affects us where we are right now. And I think at any point we can have a block or something that inside our heads that tells us no, tells us don't do it, tells us you don't want to do that. And I think the number one way you can do it is just to set a small time and give yourself the permission to stop and sit down just for a small time and do something. It can be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, but just a small little bit, sit down and do it. And you know that if you want to stop in 5 minutes, you can stop in 5 minutes, you can walk away and go do something else. But at least you did it for 5 minutes. And that's how I've always kind of gotten out of any kind of block. Because every single time I sit down for 5 minutes or sit down for 10 minutes and my alarm goes off on my phone, I'm like, nope, you can go away right now. I'm continuing. I think that's the best way to do it. But there are times when the alarm goes off and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, we're done. This isn't going to work tonight. And also, don't beat yourself up over that. Don't beat yourself up about that, because some days it's okay not to. Some days you need to not do something. And that's okay.
Amazing. We have another question from Darren. That question is it easier to get a requested map or just use your own creative process?
I think if the request is specific, it's easier for that. Because I don't have to think about it. If it is general, it's harder, because then I'm worried about whether or not I'm making something that somebody is wanting or asking for. And a perfect example of this, I messaged a few patrons there, and I said, right, I'm going to be, for the next month, Give you the opportunity. Is there something that, you would want? And one person said, I need a church map for an upcoming fight. And they're not really time sensitive because they're not really there yet, but he knows it's going to come up. I'm like, cool. What kind of church? And I started asking leading questions. Who's in charge? What kind of rooms? What do you need room for? What could the players be getting into? And they gave me a list of things that they're going to need in their campaign. And then boom, I've already started running with that. Not a bother. But if you just said, give me a church, I'm worried that I might make a map that doesn't match the function. But if it's something for me, I have no bother with that. I can sit down and just go, right? Because that's what I'm used to doing. When I draw, when I paint, or whatever, most of the time I sit down, I have a blank sheet of paper, and you just put a mark on the page and just see what comes from it. And I use that same mentality for map making. So,
when someone asks something, you might not see the vision that they have in their own mind, and that's why you need to actually ask those leading questions. That's so good. Okay, now the next question is from Cody W. What has been your favorite or most rewarding creative challenge in your cartography career thus far?
Yeah, most rewarding. I made a map for my players. It's a nautical campaign. It's a ship that they're on. And I was quite happy with it. It was super detailed in the very beginning of me making maps. And I was very happy with it, right? But as I started getting better and better at making maps, it wasn't hitting the mark. Every time I logged into Roll20 and, they were on it. And so I made it. It was actually my first month, I think, for Patreon. I made their map again, and I made it full detailed, full everything. And they didn't know about it. And when they logged in and they saw the new map, it was like, oh. And it was a wonderful moment for me to reward the players for all of their hard work that they've done in a really fun, unique way that I could do that for them. I think that was the best time for sure, 100%. Being able to upgrade something for them, using the skills that I've learned and making them happy.
That's so cool. I love that. Okay, the next question is from Orla. Orla asks, how do you find motivation to be creative when you don't feel creative?
Yeah, I think the idea that we need to feel creative to create something I don't think that's right. I think we have to find our own motivation. I think we have to find our own creativity. I think if you sit around waiting for the creative impulses to happen, you're going to be sitting around thinking about all those times you didn't do something. Whereas if you go chasing it, you're going to find it. And that might mean a walk in the woods or a walk with a dog, or it might mean going somewhere to get some, thoughts flowing. It might mean sitting down with a piece of paper. It might mean sitting down with whatever it is that you are wanting to do for creativity that you don't have the motivation for. Find a way to do it. Read a book, play a video game, do something that sparks your mind, something that's not, I guess something that's active, something that makes you think, makes you make decisions, or makes you think about something. And then just do it, just sit down and just do something. It doesn't have to be, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be the thing that you even want to do, right? It could be something completely different. Just sit down and do something, use your hands, use your mind, and the motivation will come to you. If you seek out through creativity, if you seek out the motivation, you will find it. If you wait for it, it'll go find somebody else who's looking for it.
I love that this is turning into a TED Talk. I love this. Okay, so Orla has another question, and that question is there anything in your maps that is influenced by the games you run, or a reoccurring Easter egg?
I put little animals in every single map. Like in some maps you'd be hard pressed to find because they are like little mice in like the shadows and they're only barely visible. I put little tiny things like that all over the place. And I find it fun. I find it really kind of rewarding to add but it also adds a little bit of life to things, right? If you notice the tiny little rats or mice in the corner and there's like a little piece of cheese, you're like, oh, that's funny. And yeah, I am guilty of, I make maps that I can use in my own games. Right. And, and D&D and RPGs, if any RPG, what I can use in my own games, other people can use in their games too. So, I will often make maps that are designed for what I'm going through in my own games. And the benefit of that is that other people can still use them and get benefit just like I did.
Okay. So. The next question, the next and final fan question is from Rory. And Rory asks, what is your favorite or least favorite map and why?
So my favorite map, and this is going to be kind of a weird one, is probably my first map that I made, because I actually did it. I sat down and I made it, and it's a little town that the players were being attacked by frogs and being mind controlled, and it was really quirky and fun. It wasn't great, it wasn't a great map, but it was the first time I sat down and I did it, right? And I made it myself, and I was able to do it.
It's your first.
My first, yeah, and if you think favorite of like quality wise and stuff like that shifts every single time I make a new map. Essentially, every time I make a new map, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite, and the next one comes up, this is my favorite. But like from sentimental reasons, it's that map. It was that adventure that's my campaign's group are called the Toad Lickers because they were fighting the Toad Lickers because they were fighting like some frogs, and one of them licked it and then became possessed by the frog, and so they became the Toad Lickers, and for 3 years they have been known as the Toad Lickers.
I love this.
So yeah, anytime I'm scrolling through my files and stuff, that file is called the Toad Lickers, and it makes me smile and laugh every single time.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay. And also, do you have a least favorite one?
Least favorite one? That's a really interesting question. I don't think there is a least. Like, I don't view any of the maps that I've made negatively, I guess, is a way to say it. Like I even before we were having our chat today, I was going back looking at some of my old maps, and I'm looking at them being like, oh, those are rough, right? Those are not the same quality that I would make now, and I was submitting that for other people to use, and and things like that. But I don't look at that negatively, right? Because I had to make that map to get to where I am now. It was all a stepping stone. So I don't really have a least favorite in terms of something being negative. And I so far I haven't found anything that I don't like making either. So everything that I've been doing so far, I've really enjoyed.
These were all the fan questions. And before I ask you one final question that I have for you, I want you to tell everyone who is listening or watching this where they can find you online, and what is one thing that you want them to see.
Yeah, so Instagram and Patreon are kind of my main two ones that I use. Branching into other things, but those are the main two. Instagram is Tyndall Doodles, and the Tyndall doodles for those who are listening. And then the Patreon is TD Maps, so it's Tyndall Doodle Maps. And those are places that you can that you can go to. And look, if you go on my Instagram, you can see examples of maps and stuff like that. But have a look at this thing. And for those on the podcast, you have to go and look for it. It's a watercolor painting that I did not too long ago for a Legend of Zelda character. I really enjoy it, and it's probably one of my more favorite watercolors that I've done. So if you're gonna find something, go there and have a look at it.
And now, my final question for you, Zachary. What is in the future of TD Maps and Zachary?
Yeah, I think there's a few things I definitely want to do more in the future. I want to get into adventure writing, small modules. I don't want to do anything big. I want to do things that are bite sized that you can pick up for any session and go with. So 3 to 4 page modules that covers everything from the DM tools and needs to start to finish. And so I think that's something that I definitely want to do. I have started doing more digital art, some doodling and drawing myself, doing it more digitally to see if I can maybe use that as a way to speed up my production. So I can even do my own kind of monster art and stuff like that to go along with it. Yeah, in the future, definitely just a few more resources to go with the maps. So that way you get the maps plus some extras, whether it's, NPCs and plot quests and, those kind of things, or it's a small adventure, or some drawings or something to go with it. That's definitely something that I, in my kind of short term, wanting to do. Medium term, I'm working on logistics for getting stuff printed, and I want to do a few conventions. Because then I don't have imposter syndrome, because I can actually be somewhere physically with a product rather than just sitting here in the office. And with that, we'll have my own website and stuff like that done, so that way I can offer in-person printed maps, but also basically like a voucher for online maps and stuff that can be redeemed on my website and things like that. For digital stuff, and that's kind of the medium term, right? That's the end of the year. That's my goal for kind of the end of this year. And then longer term goals is the kind of like we talked about with, maps that kind of all go together, that can be put together for bigger projects, and things of that nature. Even maybe smaller Kickstarter type things where you get like a, digital map art bundles and stuff like that, just to get my toes wet, right? Just to kind of see what I can do. Not expecting to make lots of money, but just trying to get the experience, right? Because again, if you don't put yourself out there, you don't get anything. So, yeah, I think that's where I'm looking, right? And like I've said, my priority at the moment is my family, and looking after the family during the days, and I do this on the evenings and weekends. And it's, getting myself set up for the next 2-3 years so that I can hit it hard then, and so it's a slow grind, but I like it. I love it. I enjoy it. And I look forward to the community growing and doing more.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Geek Peek. Before I let you go, I want to thank the individuals who went the extra mile and became my patrons. So, without further ado, thank you to Arthur Morrill, Bob Prescott, Lexi Gardner, Cody Neville, Charlie Fisher, Stoat Dross, Laura Jane Hamilton, Maggie, Grace Bauer, Captain K-Snow, Tyler Felsted, Ella Lubell, Mendy Kennedy, Ross Simpson, Jacob Koch, Emma Rose D20 is my church, Patch Kelly, Sarah Kate Noel, and Zachary Tyndall. If you want to join them, please head on over to patreon.com/the Oren Cohen, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.